If anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single psychic who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they are able to read minds. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single astrologer who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they can predict future human events by interpreting celestial signs. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single homeopathic practitioner who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that solutions made up of infinitely tiny particles of good stuff dissolved repeatedly into relatively huge quantities of water have a consistently higher medicinal value than a similarly administered placebo. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single spiritual person who's been able to show either empirically or logically the existence of a higher power with any consciousness or interest in the human race, or ability to punish or reward humans for their moral choices, or that there is any reason other than fear to believe in any version of an afterlife, I will give you my piano, one of my legs, and my wife.
And we are the Non-Prophets. I'm your host, Dennis Lubay, along with Matt Dillahunty, R.N. Ra, Lalandra, and Beth Presswood, and we're coming to you live, inevitably, from the Dillahunty International Studios in Austin, Texas on the 2nd of July, 2011. And thanks to the unavoidable invention of the Internet, the music you heard was If You Open Your Mind Enough, Your Brain Will Fall Out by Tim Minchin. This show is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit educational organization whose existence was already destined when our ancestors first stepped out of the trees. Its goals towards the promotion of positive atheism and the separation of church and state were written in the slow geologic motion of the continents themselves. If you want to know more about the ACA and how the formation of the Earth was a crucial event in its history, you can visit their voicemail at 512-371-2911 or visit the website at www.atheist-community.org. The unstoppable motion of our local galactic cluster decrees that the Non-Profit broadcasts live every Saturday from 2 to 3 o'clock Central Time. If you want to participate in this event, 13.5 billion years in the making, you can join the chat room by following the instructions at www.nonprofitsradio.com. So given that the entire history of the universe, starting with the initial conditions of the Big Bang itself, leads inexorably to this show, this very moment, don't you think you had better sit back and enjoy it?
Hooray. Although, are we doing another episode on free will today? Because that was like kind of a fatalistic, deterministic opening that would lead to another 3-hour episode on free will that I think we should freaking avoid. So, in other quickie announcements, the Atheist Experience will be on tomorrow as normal, and I will not be hosting tomorrow because tomorrow is Russell's week, and he'll be on with Jen Peoples, and they'll be taking calls from all sorts of people. Hopefully, we'll get more theistic callers and more atheistic callers and less batshit crazy homophobes from California who want to call in to talk about gay marriage, which, by the way, woohoo for New York. And your mic is going to keep like occasionally cutting out, so it's a good thing you got headphones on and you can check it. Mm-hmm. There's a bad cable. So we made some improvements to the Non-Profits podcast, but fixing that cable wasn't one of them. Right. It's like next on the list. But we upgraded the bandwidth, so for those of you, and we also have some new streaming opportunities that are hopefully going to be live next week. For those of you who listen as a podcast, because the live show is always full, the previous limit was like at 32. That limit has been upped to 100, and it's already increasing right now. And it may be increased further, and there'll be more streaming stuff. Also, while I can't announce the full details yet, it looks like the Atheist Community of Austin is about to close on a building. Dead silence.
Wow.
Yeah, there's the wow.
That'll be a trip.
Yeah.
we can move all this stuff there.
Yes. It'll be a little while before the building's completely set up.
Oh, sure.
You know, after the close, we're going to have to do some renovation and a lot of setup. But the plan is, if we lose the public access studio, we will have that building, and it will already be set up, because as soon as one of the first things is to set the back room up as a proper studio for the nonprofits, so that on weeks when I'm not here or not available or not feeling like it, somebody else can still go in and do an episode of the nonprofits.
The show must go on.
Your mic must go off.
The show.
There we go.
Hello?
No.
Nope.
All right. Dennis's mic is being finicky, so I'll work on that in just a moment. So we have more people in Dillahunty International Studios than we've had in a long time, and I would bring them around, you know, so that they can comment on the opulence of the current studio, which is just, I mean, it's clear that I'm like a gazillionaire, you know, with all this space, as I have people in the $10 collapsible chairs that you can get at like Walmart to take out to the fireworks displays and stuff. And I know there's like 3 laptops on a folding card table that we have set up here. No, but it's all gold plated and it's wonderful.
I thought you were going to talk about the panoramic view out of the main window of the entire Gulf of Mexico that we can see from this altitude.
It's amazing. It's you just wouldn't believe it. And by the way, none of you are invited to ever come over here. All of you people listening, stay the hell away from Dillahunty International Studios. No, just kidding. So, yeah, we're hoping to have the building set up before long. We're hoping to start doing the podcast from there. There's other improvements coming. But, hey, we've only got like an hour and some change today. So, in the studio today, we have, once again, my friend Aaron Ra, who is down this weekend.
No, I'm not down. I'm up. That was a good show. We came down for Tim Minchin last night. I love that theater, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean,
the Paramount's nice.
It's a small theater, but it's elegant and beautiful, and I felt it. We were very close to the stage, and it felt very cozy, much more enjoyable as a concert performance than many of the big shows that we've seen, because we were so close to the star.
Yeah, and I made the mistake. I booked tickets like just before they went publicly available with like the pre-access code, and I'd never been in the Paramount before, so I went online and looked, and they have a picture from every seat. So I picked the front row of the upper balcony because I figure the picture looks good. I can see the whole stage. It's a relatively small theater. There's nobody in front of me. There's like an aisle, you know, and it would have been perfect. It was a little higher up and a little farther away than I thought. You know, Tim looked. It could have been somebody other than Tim. I might, and I might not have noticed, as long as they had the right hair. But no, I had a great time. It was an awesome concert, and so many people there. Either recognized me or Beth from Facebook or somebody, and came up and commented about the show, and we had a good time. After the show was over, we met and walked down a couple blocks to Iron Cactus. And went in and had a drink or so because it was unusually muggy last night, so we didn't hang out very long.
Yeah, for your international viewers, I wanted to point out that Austin is quite beautiful on the summer nights downtown. My wife was very happy with the visit. It was hot for most visitors, I'm sure, but I've acclimated to the heat. I'm used to it. There was a lot of the typical scene that you see with all the young people out with the bongo drums in the streets and all that cultural kind of thing going on. And it was just a very pleasant evening overall until we got to the one club, and in the upper balcony it was, as you said, it was very muggy.
Yeah.
But overall, the rest of the evening, quite lovely. We wish we could move to Austin because it's got to be the most enjoyable town in Texas.
No, you're supposed to move to Austin because the atheist community of Austin is here. The premier atheist fucking organization on the planet in a local context.
I thought the Catholics were the premier atheist fucking.
Oh. All right. So we got potentially a bunch of stuff to get through and not a lot of time. So we'll skip all the announcements and get right to the meat. Apart from coming down from a Tim Minchin concert, you were in Ireland recently.
That was also an excellent trip. Although I didn't get to see much of the country. I walked out of the hotel I think twice and seriously, and walked around town a little bit. It was nice. I enjoyed every bit of it that I could, but the company that we encountered at the convention was so much on its own that I didn't really need to see anything else. I was completely committed to the event, and I have a newfound respect for P.Z. Myers. He and I hit it off very well right from the get-go. I mean, the first thing, when I got off the plane and I get through customs, which for me is something new because I've never been an international traveler until a month ago, I come out of customs and I met P.Z. Myers, who was riding in the same car to the hotel with me. First things that I said to him was, so I'm a dictionary atheist, am I? And I have to give PZ credit. He is a man without fear. I mean, he completely stood his ground without the slightest intimidation, and I don't think he can be intimidated. I'm very impressed with him.
And how do you not love him?
Oh,
I mean, it's just
he did a very good presentation when it was his time to do so, and he was nothing short of eloquent when he was accosted by the Islamist activists that came to raid the event.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be concerned about, Islam being the fastest growing religion, and if you watch enough Pat Condell videos, you get completely overwhelmed by the fear of all that. And what I saw was the waves of Islam crashing against the rock that was PZ.
Yeah. Well put.
Yeah,
although let's not sit here and blow PZ
video.
all show, because he's got enough fans, and we're among them, and it's awesome. So what else? I mean, you're there in Ireland, a trip that I wanted to take, hanging out with some of the people that I wanted to hang out with, and I wanted to be there with you, but I couldn't. So what all did everybody miss who didn't get to go to this?
Well, the presentations were not formal speeches. Almost everything was panel discussions, and I generally prefer panel discussions. Afterward, we had great conversations in the lounge. On Saturday night, I didn't even leave the hotel at all. Everybody was upbeat continuously. It was loud, positive conversation all night long from every table. The place was packed, and it was a great scene. As far as getting out and seeing the city, I mean, I think I walked 2 blocks and found myself in an ancient little wooden pub, just down the pub, having a pint with me mates.
Cool.
And we have a bunch of unbelievers with a whole lot of different accents from all over the world.
Yeah, stuff we Americans only see in movies.
Yep. I drank more Guinness that weekend than I've ever had in my life, and I'm really happy to say that I didn't buy any of them.
So, I'm at a loss.
Well, you may have missed
Your
trip,
microphone,
but you have. God, you may have missed the trip, but you have an awesome T-shirt.
Oh yeah, I got the T-shirt from the Tim Minchin concert last night, which was cool and all, but we're not going to ramble on about the concert thing from last night. So there's a bunch of stuff that is going on. I mean, you went to the AAI convention in Dublin. I've already talked about the American Atheist convention that I went to in Des Moines, which, by the way, I got my thank you gift for. It's a blue atheist Snuggie, because we're all so lovable, and there's a picture of it up on Facebook. And then the Rapture Ram, but there's more stuff actually coming up, and it's like there's been some concern that perhaps there's just too many conferences to go to. And I say bollocks. Yeah. Do them all the time. Because you're going to get. There's some people who aren't going to be able to go to every one of them, but there's going to be some people who the one that you would have canceled is the only one that they would have been able to go to.
Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to Tulsa.
Yeah,
I'm actually expecting that to be a rewarding trip to take. And not just because I'm speaking and you're speaking and the Thinking Atheist is speaking, and that we're all going to be in the shadow of the Oral Roberts University, the city of faith and the 900-foot Jesus and all of that nonsense. So just what a perfect place to hold an atheist convention,
yes.
Is it not? And then I just got, as you know, that email this morning inviting me to the Texas Free Thought Convention, which is also the annual convention for American Atheists.
No, Atheist Alliance International America.
American Atheists. Okay, say it again.
Atheist Alliance International America.
Okay, see, I'm getting confused with all the A's and wondering if my car's in good shape.
So, if you go to freeok.org, that's the website for the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention, which will be in Tulsa. It's a one-day event. You don't have to worry about, taking off days and doing a big, long weekend thing. It's Saturday only. It'll be me, Aaron Ra, the Thinking Atheist, and a couple of others who, for some reason, don't appear on that list right now. But there's a website up July 30th, the end of this month, shy one day. And you can get tickets online. And if you're in that area and haven't already got your tickets, get them and come down. And you can say hi to me and Aaron and a bunch of other atheists and free thinkers in your area, which is the whole reason that we do these things. I don't run around to talk to all these groups just to hear myself talk. I can do that here. It's about building up other communities in other areas. And this, by the way, is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Tulsa. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because we've talked about them before. There's the Atheist Community of Topeka, the Atheist Community of Tulsa, and I think the Atheist Community of Toronto. I don't know what it is with the T's, but they have all done something, and those are the people you want to talk to. They've taken the Constitution and bylaws of the Atheist Community of Austin. In some cases, it doesn't apply to all of them. Modified them for themselves because we already did the legwork with a lawyer to make sure. Filed their paperwork to get recognized as a 501c3 nonprofit. Have the Constitution and bylaws there, modified, set up, and you get a group going that you can then build off of. It's a model that works. I didn't come up with it. I can't take any credit for it. I can't even explain to you everything you need to do to make it happen, although one of the plans for the future is to put together a packet that makes it very easy for anybody in their local area to take the work that everybody else has done to create their organizations and make one in their area.
Start your own bootstrap franchise.
And while, I've said it before, while organizations like American Atheists, who I'm a member, love them, work with them whenever I can, Atheist Alliance International, Secular Coalition for America, Freedom from Religion Foundation, all of these national and international groups that I am either a member of or my membership has lapsed and I'm getting ready to renew, they're all awesome and they're working top down. We're working bottom up, and we need all of us. We need more little local community groups, and it can start with something as simple as a meetup, an online conversation, a let's go have a bagel, which is how ours started.
Right.
And let's go out for drinks. Let's have a Skeptics in the Pub thing. Let's have a free thought, showing of some film, whether it's, The God Who Wasn't There, or Religulous, or, Passion of the Christ. And maybe we can turn Passion of the Christ into something like Rocky Horror, where you bring props and you make fun of people.
Throw your popcorn.
Plus, they're all speaking Aramaic and stuff, so it's not you can make fun of it however you want. Did he really just say that? I never knew. But anyway, this is going on in Oklahoma in October, and I will get more information very soon. The Texas Free Thought Convention is having a joint convention with Atheist Alliance International America. Nick Lee's the president of that group. Nick is going to be our lecturer tomorrow, because tomorrow's our monthly lecture series. Nick Lee will be there. It's at the Austin History Center, corner of 9th and Guadalupe, beginning at around 12:15. And he will also be a guest on the Atheist Experience the following Sunday, July 10th.
Cool.
All right, so I've announced all the conventions, and everybody should, go to them and support them and have fun. By the way, the Texas Free Thought AAI convention is going to be huge.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we've moved this convention every year. It started in Austin, went to San Antonio, then Dallas, now it's in Houston, and next year it's going to be in Austin. And those of us who are hoping to help set up the Austin one were like, every year it's gotten better and bigger. And we were encouraging, Houston to have a really good convention, but not to set the bar so high that we couldn't top it when it was our turn. They have worked just amazingly. Dawkins is going to be there. Hitchens, if he's in good health. Basically, everybody who's anybody is going to be there, and I probably shouldn't say that because there's probably somebody who's significant and who I love who didn't get invited, and I'm sorry. Come anyway.
The beauty of doing these sorts of online worldwide broadcasts is that anything that you omit or screw up, you will find out about in your email.
Yes.
In abundance immediately.
It's probably already there. If it weren't for the delay on the stream, I would probably already be told.
So our aim is to fill the Austin Convention Center?
Yeah, well, the thing is that it's also 2012.
Yeah.
So it's going to be celebrate the end of the world
End of the
thing.
world.
Yet another end of the world that didn't happen.
That's right.
You know,
Another one.
you got to like it, though, because they're giving you an excuse to party. You know, just like Prince did. Even after 1999 came and went, they still played the damn song. Now it's just like, let's reminisce like it's 1999. All right. So, apart from not getting out of the hotel very much in Dublin and enjoying the speakers, you've been to a couple of events now, and one of the things that happened was this spontaneous debate that P.Z. Myers was kind of accosted outside. And I was watching the debate without knowing exactly what was going on, and I hear Arn's voice from off camera coming in, just you could tell he'd been ready to pounce for like a minute. So for the people who haven't actually seen the clip yet, give us a little rundown of how that went and then what happened afterward with regard to like the magic sandwich and stuff.
Well, from what I understand, there was a group calling themselves the Islamic Education and Research Academy. We can't see that they've actually done any research, but the senior researcher paid the €100 each for him and 4 of his associates to go to the atheist convention. And I thought there was a great deal of irony because this is a man who said, or at least is publicly quoted as having said, that we as Muslims reject the idea of freedom of speech and even the idea of freedom. And I have seen a number of debates where he attempts to challenge free speech, at least conceptually. He doesn't make any kind of strong arguments. Everything is an existential question. Everything is philosophical. Everything is a matter of opinion. You can't pin him down on much of anything. But he does speak out against freedom of speech. And I thought it was enormously ironic that he, as a non-Christian, as a Muslim, goes to a country that actually does not have a legal separation of church and state. It literally is a Christian country with a blaspheme law. And he goes to an atheist convention to try to argue against atheism while not supporting free speech. And he supports, and he said in the show, he supports the death penalty by medieval means for apostates and blasphemers.
A sweet guy.
So by his own criteria, he would, if the laws were the way he wants them to be, he would have his head chopped off in Ireland for spreading non-Christian slogans and philosophies.
But we're more moral than he is.
I'm sorry to say we wanted to have a very structured conversation, and it wasn't possible to do. We've got to do something about, when we have a guest on, we have too many other people, and everybody wants to get in on it. When the guy said that he supported beheading because it was a humane way of dealing with conflict resolution because it was painless. We're not talking about cutting yourself. We're not talking about cutting yourself shaving really, really deeply.
Wow.
I mean,
it's certainly final. Sure.
Okay, there's so much that I wanted to get out, and when you've got 4 or 5 guys in there all jumping in at the same time, you just can't. I wanted to express.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's a
I have no idea what you mean about people talking over and interrupting each other. It's never happened here.
It's a Muslim gish gallop? What?
I know that I'm guilty of that, and I know that I'm guilty of that because my wife reminds me after every broadcast. She tells me for an hour everything that I did wrong and need to correct next time. But when you've got all these people, when he said that, we the gloves came off of everybody. I mean, we all wanted a piece of this guy straight away. I couldn't believe you may grow up in a culture that tolerates and considers acceptable certain types of comments, but he immediately began to criticize us for our sensitivities because we were too sensitive to things like the death penalty based on a different opinion.
What are you getting so worked up about? He did something wrong. We're killing him. We're doing it as humanely as possible.
Exactly. We're only cutting through the most major nerve center that he has, and in a situation where he will remain conscious until all the blood ebbs out of his brain. So we have complete horror and excruciating pain combined, but it's humane.
Because we do it really, really fast.
Well, if we've been doing this since the Stone Age, then it has to be a good idea, and we don't need to change it, right?
Yeah. Let's have a nice, peaceful conversation with somebody who wants us dead.
He asked me.
Wow.
He asked me to join him for coffee.
No, you might cut my head off.
He said he was coming to Texas, and if he came to Texas, would I join him for a cup of coffee? I thought having this guy in the U.S., in Texas, would be so funny because his arguments were that we were a completely secular society and that was what was wrong with the West. Now, he took all the crimes that go on. He took all the crimes, the crime rate in the United States, and he blamed that on the West for being secular. And I said, well, this is because we have the highest murder rate because we are also the most religious nation. He goes, I don't understand. It's a secular society. No. It's a legally secular government, and everyone in the government is a religious whack job. So everywhere where we have the death penalty, we also have the highest murder rate.
Right.
So that does not work as a deterrent. And the argument was farcical, and I could not get out any of the points that I wanted to bring up about the nerve center, about the consciousness remaining in the brain even after the head's been cut off, and so many other things that I wanted to hit this guy with. I was glad that we did point out one thing, that he attacked P.Z. Myers, saying, "Why did you hate Muslims?" And P.Z. again, fearless, unintimidated.
Right.
He says, "Because we don't hate Muslims, we hate Islam, if we hate anything at all." What? What? You need to stop. No. This is why I get lost. She says, "No, do it as I say. Turn right." No, if I turn right, I'll be over there. Stop.
Trying to clarify that it was humane in comparison to stoning people to death. So they're not complete barbarians. They'll behead you.
Okay.
It's less painless than stoning.
It's less painful than stoning. Awesome.
So burying you up to your neck and having you eaten by ants from off, by comparison to that, compared to anything sane, however, well then you got it. I did get him to realize that. Okay, you attacked me. What? I'm talking in the mic.
No, you're not.
Okay.
She was pestering you on my behalf. Because when you turn and look at Dennis, you get away from the mic.
Okay, I'll try to be calm.
So anyway, back to the actual conversation.
All right, so where was I?
You got a point across.
Yes, we did.
They're not barbarians.
So he comes up and he challenges PZ with why do you hate?
Right.
Why do you hate Muslims? And he's misrepresenting, and it's very confrontational, right? And it was a little disturbing to us that this guy shows up with an Armani suit, as all of his guys who had these great suits on,
right?
And they had actual movie camera, not just the kind of cameras that we regular Joes have, but the whole big on the shoulder type movie camera, the professional microphones, all of this. Which we understand was all paid for by a charity that was intended to use that money to feed the poor. But it will go for spreading religion, so that's perfectly all right. So this guy comes up and brings this kind of confrontation, and they start talking about the embryology. How could Muhammad have known about the embryological stages? They were all such a backward and primitive society. And one of the other advantages to these type of public broadcasts on the interwebs is that people will take this statement and they will expose everything wrong with it. And that video, which was done by 13 different cameras, because it was at a convention of nerds, the place is full of YouTubers, so there's videos from every imaginable angle. And we have it up from Skepchick, and we have it up from the IERA themselves. They thought they did a good job. And I don't think anybody ever shot Islam in the foot more than these guys did in that one confrontation. Their claims about the miracles of the Quran and embryology were completely destroyed by everybody that got a hold of that video, showing how Aristotle had written the exact same wrong information 1,000 years before Muhammad. Not only was Muhammad not advanced, he was wrong. He was 1,000 years behind his time.
He was plagiarizing.
That particular argument's always struck me as pretty stupid, because we are very anachronistic, and we are very in love with the fact that we live in the best of all times. Mm-hmm. And it's true. So things have never been better than they are right now, even when they're bad. I mean, as far as, like our knowledge base, because we continue to learn more and we stand on the shoulders of giants, etc. But when people say, how could somebody, relatively uneducated 700 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, how could they have known these things that science didn't discover until much later? Well, in some cases, they're just flat wrong, and that we had actually had a pretty good understanding of them before. It's just that we don't have a good recorded record, and science... the scientific method wasn't formalized, and until people began to be educated better. But the thing is, when you're talking about something like embryology, well, how could they know what's going on? Excuse me, we've had animal husbandry for 7,000 years before this, and you don't think that people started to recognize when animals would miscarry and their wives would miscarry at different times along the way, that what they miscarried looked a little different? It doesn't take any sort of intelligence, if you're working in an agrarian society, to start recognizing, hey, she's starting to get big, and then there's a miscarriage, and that must be what would have been a child later on, but it looks so much different. Yeah, there weren't people running around doing detailed dissections and analyzing this scientifically, but the idea that nobody could have noticed this stuff just boggles my mind.
Yes. It's actually worse than that, because
we eat eggs.
It actually is worse than that, because there were people doing detailed dissections 1,000 years before, and there were people there were people that were trained in anatomy, in Persian science, that were in communication with Muhammad and his people. And as a matter of fact, he had direct, common, consistent communication with 2 trained physicians in Persian science, one of them well-versed in Aristotle, and it was very clear. He had access to the information, he plagiarized it, and the information happened to be wrong. And when they were shown that the information was wrong, they said, well, if that's the case, then the Quran is still right, because you can translate this word to mean at the same time as, it can be simultaneously as well as subsequently.
Oh, good grief.
And then we showed, because the guy chooses the word, he says thamma. Well, it wasn't thamma that was used in that scene, it was fa, which means subsequently, not simultaneously. Now, the guy that made that comment realized, somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, that's not really right. So he says, yes, it is, and he made a follow-up video where he told people to go look it up themselves, and he gave a specific reference, Lane's Lexicon, which is going to prove that he was correct in the use of the word fa to mean simultaneously with reference to this particular verse. However, as I think it was Almighty Atheismo or one of these others, the Rationalizer, one of them, actually showed the Lane's Lexicon, and the passage that they refer to as an example for the meaning of that word was the very passage in question, showing that it could only mean subsequently and not simultaneously, and it was the reference that Adnan Rashid had chosen himself to prove him right.
It's like going to the dictionary and looking up stupid and finding a picture of your own face.
Yep.
So then, when they realized, as they're talking to Pizzi, and they're talking to him about embryology, and they said, but this is what the embryologists are telling us, Pizzi says no, and they challenge him on that. Well, this is his field.
Yes.
He says it's my
Which they
field.
Didn't know.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
let's not do any research on our enemy.
Once they realized that Pizzi was an embryologist and that they were wrong and would have to be forced to admit that, they immediately changed the subject to geology. Hello? I'm standing there. So they started talking about isostasy. Now, at the time, I couldn't hear what it was that he was saying. It wasn't until I could get a hold of the videos later to realize what exactly the Quran had said about mountains and isostasy, so I didn't know what his argument was. When I had the chance to look it up in the Quran and everything, we get him on the show, I explained to him what isostasy really is. His description was that the Quran posits that mountains have roots and that they stick into the ground and that they prevent earthquakes. Essentially, this is his argument. This is not verbatim.
Right, and
essentially
they gather nutrients. Yeah,
exactly, and they prevent earthquakes. And now they've understood isostasy as being this process where now they know that mountains have roots and that they do prevent earthquakes. So I finally had to get him on and say, no, isostasy means that mountains float in the lithosphere much like icebergs, so that you have more of it showing under the surface than you see above the surface, and the tectonic plates continue to move beneath them, so it does not hold the Earth still and prevent it from moving. It moves. And the mountains don't prevent earthquakes. In fact, they're caused by earthquakes, and we finally got him to admit that he was wrong, and he didn't realize it, but that the Quran is very explicit in its description of mountains preventing earthquakes, and that they are laid out more or less like paperweights on the carpet or carpet tacks on a flat map that is the world, to prevent the world from shaking. So the Quran is wrong, and he admitted that his interpretation of it was wrong. And he's not here to try to defend himself, which I wish he would. I wish he was. I can't wait till he comes to Texas. When he said he was going to come to Texas and have coffee with me, somebody in the chat room says, "You're going to love our airports."
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, not only that, but there's a couple of things. One quick one. Mountains aren't one thing. This is a mistake, not just with regard to geology, that people make all the time, all of us, including, those of us sitting right here, that we talk about things in a way that isn't specific enough. So a mountain isn't necessarily one thing. There are areas where plates collide and shift over, and the protrusion becomes what we then identify as a mountain, even though it's different from others. I mean, there's lots of examples like that where our imprecision of understanding and language is a barrier to effective communication. But what I hear on the issue of like embryology and all this all reminds me of the same nonsense we deal with when we're dealing with psychics on two different fronts. One of them is the obvious turning hits or misses into hits and operating on selective memory and other things like that. The other aspect of this that reminds me of the psychic thing is something that I forgot while I was waiting to talk.
You should try a notepad.
I have one normally, but I'm trying to do the show behind.
You could almost view it as the holy books are a cold reading of reality. They're making a bunch of wild guesses, and maybe one or two of them will actually correspond to something you see.
There is an aspect of that. I had something. Trust me, it was really fucking brilliant, but it'll have to come back some other time.
Yep.
It was the smartest thing I ever thought of.
You really
I promise.
need to get a notepad. I did not have one when I was here last time, and I failed the same way because of it. That's why I've got notes in front of me now. And this way, maybe the next time the Atheist Alliance of America comes up, I won't screw up and call them American Atheists again.
But Dave doesn't really mind, Dave Silverman, because that's just more press for American Atheists. Which, by the way, American Atheists this weekend has hired planes to fly banners around with two different messages. One is "Godless America," and the other one is "Atheism is patriotic." And I won't nitpick.
Interesting.
I'm still trying to grasp how atheism is patriotic.
Yeah.
But I think I understand what they mean by it in the same sense that, dissent is patriotic, and we live in a secular nation governed by a secular constitution that, is irreligious or is supposed to be irreligious. And so on that front, they're basically making a claim, I think, about us being included in the process and how absurd it is that we are the least trusted minority. And, hey, we're out here, too, and we are citizens and patriots, and a lot of us have served in the military and things like that, this nonsense about atheists and foxholes. So on that front, I'm really I'm happy with the banners in general. I mean, we can nitpick little things, but we can nitpick about every little thing. I'm glad that the banners are happening, and I'm glad that somebody decided to refuse to fly a banner somewhere, basically saying, I'm not going to hell for doing that. It's a good bit of publicity. It, I think, brings attention to bigger issues. On a legal front, he has every right to refuse. And likewise, if I owned a plane and a banner company, and Jerry Falwell asked me, well, he's dead, so that would actually change things quite a bit. If Pat Robertson asked me to, hired me to fly a banner for him, as happy as I would be to take his money and donate it to atheist organizations, I think that there are situations in which I might refuse, in much the same, because it's not just If he wanted to come in and buy a service from me, like changing the tires on his car or something like that, okay, I'm fine with that. But in this case, he would want me to be advertising for him. And I think I'd flat out refuse. Yeah. I would say, I don't want to spread your message because I don't agree with it. And as a private citizen owning my own business, I have every right to do that. And as far as I know, the individuals who refuse to fly those banners have that right. The issue here isn't one of whether or not they have a legal right. The issue is the public perception of atheists and atheism, the kind of tone of the community right now, and how common it is for people not to want to associate with people who do not believe the same things they do, even when there's no demonstrable harm. It's not like nobody can make a case that atheism is actually causing any harm.
Well, of course they do, because we created homosexuality.
Yeah.
We spawned...
That's a European
Really?
social
We did?
convention.
A European social convention.
Yes.
Damn. Wasn't aware of that.
It's because you didn't bother to watch the videos from the black atheists of Atlanta who are a bunch of homophobic conspiracy theorists and nut jobs.
That was another thing that came up in our discussion with Hamza, where he was talking about how could Muhammad have known, and I brought up the Bhagavad Gita. I'm like, okay, well look at Lord Krishna. He's talking about evolution, at least 600 years before. The first remnants of the Bible. We've got Krishna talking about evolution and complaining about atheism, and he was using the same argument that we still hear today, that those damned atheists, and they think that it's all evolution.
Those damn skeptics.
And how could he have known this?
We're all here to usher in the end of the world. It should be obvious by now. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Because this is
I keep looking
a miserable
forward to
existence.
It.
I mean, why would we want to hang out?
I partied when it was 1999, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I'm a greedy atheist. I want to live forever, which means I want the world to be really great forever.
I think, by the way, that we were talking about a minute ago, the barbaric nature of them either stoning or beheading or whatever else. I think that they're much more evil than that, and they're just trying to kill us with gradual annoyance to where we off ourselves for not wanting to listen to their shit anymore. One of the things that came up in the conversation that you guys had with the gentleman whose name I can never remember, although you get it right, Atheismo pointed out, because he was asked about what the Quranic or what the Sharia penalty for rape was, and Atheismo pointed out that it's 100 lashes to the rape victim for committing adultery. Mm-hmm. That didn't get hammered because there were several voices talking and there were two people trying to deal with two different issues. If I ever get a hold of that guy, I'm going to ask that question and verify that that's true. Because at that point, all conversation stops.
Yes.
Your religious law advocates taking a rape victim and beating them. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You were raped?
Line. We're not
you
talking
were raped?
anymore.
Come on over here. We've got 100 lashes for you for being raped.
Yeah. No. If Hamza feels upset that he wasn't adequately portrayed in his flawed conversation that everybody got live, and if he feels that he didn't get adequately represented because he was in a room with too many atheists attacking him at the same time, and here I am now attacking him again when he's not here to defend himself, well, I would suggest that he should call into the atheist experience.
Absolutely.
Where it would be much less likely to be interrupted. He'll be able to regather his arguments, and he'll be able to present something.
Well, I don't know that it's much less likely to be interrupted because
when you start many people.
Yes, you'll just be interrupted by one or two. Because when you start saying stupid shit like, "Hey, once somebody's been raped, we think it's the morally correct thing to do to beat them," you have demonstrated that your moral compass is so out of whack that nobody ever fucking needs to listen to you again.
Yeah.
That you are incapable of making decisions and thinking on your own or considering the thoughts or feelings or empathetically attaching yourself to any human being. You are a servile subject of dogma and incapable of breaking out of that box, and fuck you.
One of the arguments that he frequently uses is that his belief is not crude, and the defense for that is that he has a scope of interpretation. And I had to point out that he brought up the scope of interpretation in almost every public speech he's ever done. And I have to tell him that the scope of interpretation means that he has a limited interpretation. He's not allowed to exceed the boundaries. One of his own associates, and I wanted to bring this up in the conversation, and I didn't get to. One of his own associates, whose name I can't remember, apart from the fact that it ends in green, it's one of the converts, a European convert to Islam, was talking about how evolution within limits was acceptable to believe. You can believe in a limited evolution.
Right, microevolution.
Can you believe in limited pregnancy?
What he's talking about is evolution is fully acceptable as long as it's not inclusive of human beings. Because Adam had to be created without a father. And the problem I have with this argument is that it requires that you have a required belief, and then you have restrictions, prohibitions against belief. And if truth were the issue, if truth for truth's sake and knowledge and understanding of these sorts of things were what you were really after, there would not be either requirements or prohibitions about what you are required to believe and what you are forbidden to believe.
Yeah,
right.
And when I get into these conversations with these people, the reason that I get upset that there are so many other people involved, and I don't want to sound arrogant. I know everybody thinks I'm arrogant, that I want to have more or less a one-on-one with these people. The reason that I want to do that is because I treat these conversations like litigation. It's like you said, when he mentions this one point, we should have hammered him on that one point. Right, when he realized he was talking to an embryologist about flawed embryology, switched the topic to geology. No, I'm sorry, you will concede you were wrong about embryology before we move to the next subject. And you can't do that when you've got a half a dozen people and they all want to jump in on the last outrageous thing that he just said. No, he still needs to concede his error on the thing he said before that.
This is a problem we've dealt with on the TV show over and over again. And I've tried to institute it kind of as policy. Sometimes we let it slide if there's somebody, because if you're not willing, if you bring up a point, and many times we've just asked, give us your best argument, because if your best argument fails, there's no point in going through the ones that aren't as good. That was a good piece that was added, I think, by Jeff D. And the other thing that we've done is, before you move on to another point, if we've cornered you and whatever else, you need to at least, you don't necessarily have to concede you were wrong. You need to at least acknowledge that your point has been addressed and that you have no current response before you move on to your next claim.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not going to allow you to go on to your next claim because I have this big hang-up button.
When I brought up to Hamza that he has this belief that you were sent to heaven only if you're gullible enough to believe the story. It doesn't matter what good or bad you do in your life. You have to believe. Now, if you don't believe, it doesn't matter what good or bad you do in your life. You didn't believe, so there's only one criteria: gullibility. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
You can be forgiven if you believe. You cannot be forgiven if you don't. And
if you're skeptical at all.
So there's only one criteria: you better believe. What in reality requires such a thing? Right? So when I tell him that gullibility is the criteria and that you're damned if you don't believe, he says, no, you're quite wrong. It's quite opposite of that. That's a sexy way of saying it, you know. And then he says that his religion is quite opposite of that, and then goes on to prove the point. But I had to clarify for him, okay, so you're saying that you're not sent to hell simply for not believing. He says, no, you're right about that, but there's more to it. Well, okay, I'm right about that, but there's more to it. It doesn't matter if there's more to it. I was right about that, and you said it was completely opposite. Dead on, 100% accurate is not completely opposite. Another thing that he keeps bringing up is these outdated cliches. He uses this every 2 minutes. If you go back and watch all of his videos, which I don't recommend to anyone unless you just want to you create a chronic headache, watch all these videos. He says outdated cliches every couple of minutes. And every time he uses that, it is in reference to something that was true initially and has never been refuted. I call that a timeless truth.
Yeah.
So I'm done ranting on him.
Yeah, we'll definitely move on. Good. We got a little less than 15 minutes or so left. There's in the announcements of other events that are coming up, there's a big one that I haven't mentioned yet.
Uh-oh.
On August 6th in Houston, Texas, Governor Goodhair Rick Perry will be having a bunch of his friends down to a stadium to pray and beg for God to fix the shit that he thinks he can't fix. This is probably in preparation for him announcing his presidential candidacy.
I want to clarify something, just make sure I remember this correctly. When the last time that I was here, on the last time I was here on the Nonprofits, we discussed how Perry's own financial advisors told him 4 years ago that if you do this tax restructuring that you're trying to do, that you will be $25 billion in deficit within 4 years. And within 4 years, we were actually $27 billion in deficit. So we have a situation where we have a man who does not listen to his own advisors and created the problem that he now wants to absolve himself of guilt for by passing it off onto an imaginary friend,
Right.
and who he can then blame God for the problem he created.
To be fair, I don't know that they're necessarily going to pray about this tax issue, and also they will not be blaming God. None of them will ever blame God.
It's not that they're blaming God necessarily, but it's if it's God's responsibility to take care of the situation, they completely forget that it was Perry that created the situation.
Sure. I don't know that they're going to forget, because I don't think most of them who voted for him would ever know or acknowledge that issue.
It's all out of our hands.
But yeah, the idea that in 2011 we're going to have, seriously, not just people, not just some church, but the governor of one of the largest states,
Right.
who is a potential future presidential candidate, put out not just one, multiple calls to prayer. He had everybody praying for rain a while back. We see how well that turned out.
Yeah. Awesome.
Why on earth would anybody go to this August 6th thing to pray for additional help if we still haven't gotten the fucking rain we were praying for? But in this day and age, to have an elected representative, somebody who is supposed to be in a leadership position and guiding and fixing things and working with people and actually, doing work, to throw up his hands and give up and say, let's all get together and talk to ourselves in a room. Oh, and by the way, there was some concern that this would not be a properly ecumenical event.
Oh, God.
Everybody is invited as long as you're willing. I mean, you're Muslim, Jew, Hindu, whatever. You're all welcome to come to this prayer thing because Jesus will willingly save all of you, and we want to make sure that you know that. So this is from the American Family Association, the hate group that he's in bed with on this thing. They've basically said, yeah, this is going to be a big prayer to Jesus. Everybody's welcome because everybody needs Jesus.
Yeah, however, the bigot in charge of the American Family Association did an interview that we had the misfortune of overhearing, wherein he said that the Muslims would not necessarily be welcome there because they worship a completely different God than apparently the God of Abraham.
Man. Arrogance much?
Yeah, there was a, I forget, I don't know, we saw in a news item, basically there was a flat assertion that, oh yeah, they're welcome to come, but they can't pray to Allah. They're going to pray to Jesus. If they're showing up at this thing, they're going to be on their knees and praying to Jesus, damn it.
And it bothers me that they don't know their own theology well enough to understand that Allah means God, the God. It's still applicable whether you think that God is Yahweh or whether you think it's his kid.
So, yeah, there's this big prayer thing going on. There are atheist groups who are going to be out there protesting. I think it's... don't get me wrong. Elected officials do not have to check their religion at the door. They are still people. They get to still have their beliefs and everything else. And what they're not allowed to do is, in their official elected capacity, endorse or encourage or support religion in any way. They can still, because they don't stop necessarily being private citizens, they can still do this stuff. I think there's a fine line, and I think it's been crossed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
When you're the governor of a state and you put out a call to other governors of the state, and there was some concerns about, well, how is this being funded? Well, it's all being funded privately, including all the security that the governors get everywhere they go and all that stuff. Who knows?
And the stadium itself.
Even if it's all privately funded, I think that elected representatives, while not having to check their religion at the door, should be held to a standard where there shouldn't be any unnecessary or confusing entanglement of their particular religious beliefs with their policies and actions in their official role. And when you've got a governor who calls other governors and a bunch of people to come down and pray for the state of the nation for intervention from a god to fix this, I think you've crossed a line, and I think it's something that definitely needs to be protested.
Well, because it's not intervention of a god; it's an intervention of their specific
a particular god in a particular church in a particular way.
And they won't even accept their god, that it might be their god's father. It's just their god.
And they're showing just absolute contempt for the secular nature of the country, or it's like.
And utter contempt for a lot of their citizenry.
Yes,
but
we're
what's
second
really
class.
great about that is this is pulling people out from so many different venues. I understand the Westboro Baptist Church is going to protest this because that's all they do, right? And so there's atheist organizations that are going to be out there protesting with them.
Along with
Westboro. I'm going to get my picture with that psycho
That's
bitch.
Awesome.
Shirley, yeah.
That's awesome.
So the anal former Christian / student of religion in me can't let this slide, especially since I don't want to get emails about it. The issue of Christians viewing Muslims as worshiping a different god isn't that they don't recognize that the three Abrahamic religions originate from a similar tradition, the same tradition. They recognize that it's the reason that they claim that they're worshiping a different god is because their version of events diverged to where they are now worshiping a false representation of what used to be their God. So Muslim prayers to Allah don't actually reach Yahweh, even though the origins are supposed to be the same, because they have perverted the truth. It's like they've made there are people who are talking to the actual president of the United States, and then these other people over here have made a cardboard copy of the president of the United States. So it originated with the same image, but what they're praying to is not legit. So it's not that they don't recognize the shared origins. It's this, in their view, is idolatry. It's a fictional god that doesn't exist. So when we have to be careful, because it's good to point out the shared origins, but a lot of times I'll hear atheists, and I have done it myself in the past, say, well, you all worship the same God. It's true from an outside perspective, and looking at it from a matter of history and everything. From within the religion, it's very different. And it's right down to the point where you've got Catholics who will deny that Protestants are worshiping the same God because of that divergence. Mm-hmm. So everybody's got their own God, pretty much, and mine's the right one.
Of course, I'm not able to see it that way. I'm very confused. I mean, Yahweh and Allah are, to me, the same character, and then you have where Yahweh, Allah, Allah Abba Yahweh is what I call him, where he would say, that in the very first commandment, you will have no other gods before me, and then Jesus pipes up and says, I am the God you will have before him. Okay,
no.
And when they come up and they say, well, what happens when you die? And you find out that, that Jesus is God or whatever. Okay, well, what happens when you die? And then Yahweh, El Allah Yahweh is saying, now, what was that first commandment again? And who's this Jesus kid?
Right.
See, to be fair, though, even if we stay in the biblical tradition, Jesus didn't say anything remotely like, I am the God you will have before him. He said, I am that God.
No, he didn't.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. Jesus always, ever.
I can't believe you're going to challenge me on this. Do you know how wrong you're going to be later?
You will be the first to show me wrong in this argument, and I've been against many ministers,
Sure.
so let's go for it.
Sure, and
Okay.
and we'll look for the we'll table it for now, and we'll look for the verse where Jesus says that I am the God you will hold before the other one, and the one that says that I am that God.
You will not. You can only come to the Father. But
I and the Father are one. Have you not heard that verse?
Yes, and then there's the same passage. He also says that he that all of these other people can be one with the Father just as he is, and that they will be able to do the same things that he did, and they can do even better things than he did, because he always, only, ever describes God as someone else, somewhere else, who can do things Jesus can't do, and who knows things Jesus can't know, and he never, ever says what Krishna says a lot, that he is the manifestation, the God in the flesh. Krishna said it
Sure.
all day.
He didn't-
but
he
Jesus
didn't phrase it
never
like
said
that.
it. Jesus never implied it, ever.
Okay. We'll fix that later.
2 atheists go in, 1 atheist comes out.
Just remember that you said never implied it ever.
That's true. Now, Timothy, speaking for Jesus, might have tried to imply that, but Jesus didn't
No.
say it.
I got a red letter version.
Okay.
But anyway, I'll agree. I will definitely agree with you that Jesus didn't say it, because I'm not convinced that there necessarily was a Jesus, or that he said any of the shit that's reported there. So on that front, yeah, we're in agreement.
Okay.
All right. So
I'm sorry,
so
I haven't
we-
had an argument in a week.
it's good.
Awesome.
And this is
That's what
why
we live for.
And by the way, some people had asked for when is Schilling going to be back. I don't know. He's way busy with school. Maybe coming back, may not. He's always welcome back, of course, as one of my best friends. But I've mentioned this several times, and I've had to over the last couple of weeks. I have friends, and me and my friends will occasionally get in arguments. And the reason
yeah.
these people stay my friends is because they challenge me on shit, and I challenge them on shit, and we learn stuff, and we change our fucking minds based on evidence. And if I'm wrong, then next week I'll come in and we'll all be fine. It's not like, Aaron, I can't believe you came on my show and challenged me, even if I'm wrong. Well, I'm done with you, motherfucker. That's just so stupid.
We have to present a unified front.
That's just so stupid.
I need
Which
to
is
throw something else in on that. I got into an argument with a systematist a while back, and I was arguing that humans were not monkeys. And as has become obvious in subsequent years, although he was an arrogant bastard in everything that he said, he was not he didn't try to be sympathetic at all. You know, the validity of his argument was all he had, and he wasn't going to try to convince me with being nice. He was a complete dick. And eventually I had to write him an email back saying, you're right.
Ooh. Burn.
So along those lines, there's a number of arguments that happen, and I'm not going to dish through all of them because we're at the hour point, and we're going to close this up here in a minute. There's a number of disagreements and arguments that happen within this group, within our atheist community in Austin, within the atheist community at large. I've disagreed with. I don't know if there's anybody I haven't disagreed with, because I've disagreed with Dennis and Aaron and Beth. I don't know if I did disagree on one thing earlier this morning, but it was minor. And
You're
who
just
cares?
generally disagreeable.
I know. I'm just an angry fucking atheist. I've disagreed with PZ and Greta and Rebecca Watson and Phil Blate and I'm still in disagreement with
Is
them.
there
by the
no
way.
one you'll agree with?
And I also agree with all of those people on a great many more things than we disagree on. And what we end up arguing about quite often is very, very fine points that in the grand scheme don't make any difference. Like whether or not Aaron is right or I'm right with regard to what Jesus said. We're both of the opinion that it doesn't fucking matter because this is fairy tale stuff.
Right. We're arguing about the
Whether Darth
will
Vader,
of Darth Vader,
yeah.
and yeah.
And you know
It's
what? It's okay if you disagree, but if it was Hamza, it would be okay if you disagree and heads were rolling. You know.
there you go.
I'll do it when I cut off your head later. I'll do it really nicely. So there's
It'll
actually
be painless. You won't feel a thing.
there's actually another disagreement or two that we're not going to have any time for today, and I'm not even remotely prepared to get into. But when skepticism and atheism collide, I've talked about that a number of times, and it's there's still some issues there. There's issues with feminism and atheism, feminism and skepticism, all of these different interests and different views. And generally, I think we come out all the better for the discussions. Not always. There are some things that are really unproductive and divisive and have broken up groups and caused splinter groups and other things like that. At the end of the day, though, I like the idea that we do not present a lockstep, unified front.
Right.
on anything other than we're not buying what you're selling.
That's right. We're
You
herding
people
cats.
with religious claims,
That's what I was going to say. Damn you.
we're not buying what you're selling.
Sorry.
And that's the point.
Meow.
If you got to do a better job of selling it, and in the case of rational individuals, we need, well, I don't know, what's that word? Evidence, I think, is probably a good thing to start with. Reasoned argument is also another good one.
Yeah.
Well, of course,
make
you
your
have
case.
to specify what evidence is for many people. It's
Oh,
not,
boy.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not a logical fallacy in a circular argument that revolves around to an assumed conclusion.
Yeah, there's some standards you have
Yeah,
to
and-
That's
adhere
it!
to.
That's it. The thing that I forgot 30 minutes ago.
What's that?
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay, this happens with psychics, and it happens with people making claims about the Bible and Islam and everything else. And I have an example of it that came in with email today, and it's about burden of proof. There are 5 words that I hear over and over and over again that drive me fucking crazy. How do you explain that? I hate that. How do you explain that? Because it is a direct shifting of the burden of proof. Somebody will offer up some sort of quasi-miracle claim or some sort of assertion that somebody knew something they couldn't have, and then they'll go, how do you explain that? The direct implication is that the lack of an explanation on my part means that their supernatural bullshit explanation is somehow more plausible. It happens with psychics. It happens with ghost stories. It happens with everything that we are supposed to be skeptical about, including religion. And an email that came in today, somebody had asked yesterday, hey, why is it that you claim, or what is it that you're claiming about Christians not being able to meet their burden of proof? And I replied, and he said, okay, Matt, you said that Christian hasn't demonstrated that their supernatural claims of the religion are true, but the first verse in the Bible is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, science tells us there was a big bang in which the universe originated from. No, if that verse is correct, the first verse in the Bible, isn't it even remotely possible that every other verse would follow? Okay, despite the horrible grammar, that verse isn't necessarily correct, even though you want to interpret it to be so. And the correctness of a single verse tells you nothing at all about whether or not the rest of them are correct. But if you offered something, and he had previously offered this has happened, how do you explain that? One of my favorite things is when they do the how do you explain that, and their original claim is just wrong. I mean, like it's on Snopes wrong.
Right.
Well, let's also take a look at that.
You know, if the Earth were 10 inches closer to the sun, we'd all burn up. How do you explain that?
No.
And I have to be pedantic again. Okay, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? And the earth is without form. So we take 10 billion years roughly from the origin of the Big Bang to the origin of the earth, right? And we just condense that into a single sentence and make no acknowledgement of that whatsoever. And then we have this subsequent event where God said, "Let there be light." So after the earth exists, then light exists when, according to science, light was the first thing, and the earth came 10 billion years later. I think maybe another orders of magnitude for fractal wrongness.
Right. You can also say, so then there is evidence for God's existence, meaning that faith is unnecessary.
Wouldn't
Is
it be
that what you're
wonderful?
saying?
Yes.
You know?
I would love to see belief systems wherein faith is not necessary.
Okay. On that note,
Yeah.
wrap it up, Dennis.
All right. Well, that was our show, and we hope you enjoyed it. But now that it's over and the universe is spent, the stars are bereft of purpose, moving aimlessly through the darkness. The promise of heat death is their only succor, for though there will be other episodes of the Non-Prophets, this one is over, and we will never see its like again. So, for what it's worth, we'll be back in a week with another episode. And until then, I'm Dennis Lubay, along with Matt Dillahunty,
Bye-bye.
R.N. Ra,
Gabe?
Lilandra, and Beth Presswood,
Bye.
and A Pointless Universe. And we leave you with If You Open Your Mind Enough, Your Brain Will Fall Out by Tim Minchin.
Which I think is brilliant. It's so clever. Unfortunately, I didn't come up with it myself. I read that in a book. So to avoid copyright issues, I've given it a subtitle, which is, Take My Wife! If anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single psychic who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they are able to read minds. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single astrologer who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they can predict future human events by interpreting celestial signs. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single homeopathic practitioner who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that solutions made up of infinitely tiny particles of good stuff dissolved repeatedly into relatively huge quantities of water have a consistently higher medicinal value than a similarly administered placebo. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single spiritual person who's been able to show either empirically or logically the existence of a higher power with any consciousness or interest in the human race, or ability to punish or reward humans for their moral choices, or that there is any reason other than fear to believe in any version of an afterlife, I will give you my piano, one of my legs, and my wife.